Hey guys, it's Shelby, and today I wanted to make a video that I probably should have made closer to the beginning of the year. I intended to, and then it just didn't happen. Today I want to talk about a beginner's guide to sustainable living. Not zero waste living in particular, because I think zero waste is nearly impossible, and I think that's the first tip I need to give and the first thing that you need to keep in mind if you are embarking on a more sustainable, eco-friendly, zero waste lifestyle. Is essentially everybody you see online that uses the word zero waste is not because we're all producing zero waste. It's simply because it's the term that most people understand. It's a term that is searched a lot, and it is a term to aspire to, but it's not something to think that in the next month or two you will be a completely zero waste expert, because it just doesn't work that way. I often get asked, how long did it take me to become completely zero waste? And I always say, well, so far it's been about 12 years. And still to this day, because I do not live in a zero waste society, it is really difficult for me to be completely zero waste. And that's not my fault. That is the fault of the society that we live in. We only have access to what we have access to, right? Here are the things you should first do when you are embarking on a sustainable life. So first, like I said, I want you to keep in mind that being zero waste is not the most important thing, but tackling your personal waste footprint is the most tangible thing you can do when you want to live more sustainably. Reducing your packaging, reducing the amount of stuff you're sending to landfill is the best place to start. It's a bad place to stop. But in order to get a real handle on what you're wasting and maybe how you can improve in those areas, the first thing I recommend to do is a trash audit. This is basically where you take a week's worth of trash, or however long it takes you to fill up your trash can, and at the end of that period of time, you go through it and see what you're throwing away the most and really think through those things and if there is a better solution. So for example, maybe you're throwing away dish sponges, probably hopefully not every week, but sponges are gross, so maybe you are. Solutions to that can be compostable dish brushes, or just dish brushes in general last a lot longer than sponges and they're less gross. Maybe you're seeing coffee grounds in your trash and you realize that you could start some form of compost. Whatever it is, going through your trash and getting a good picture of what you're throwing away regularly will get you on a good path of where to start. So a trash audit is the most tangible, visible thing that you can do. I think it's very, very important. But for me personally, when I switched over to a more sustainable life, it was less about packaging and more about consumerism, because every single thing we buy has a resource footprint on the environment. Be it the fibers that had to be grown, something's made of cotton, a lot of resources go into growing that cotton, from the chopping down of forests to create farmland. The invisible water footprint of anything is massive. The greenhouse gas emissions it takes to manufacture or process, all things that we buy has a massive resource footprint to the environment. And for me, when I was an environmentalist and then I realized what a hypocrite I was by being such a hyper consumer, my initial first step should have been to do a bank account audit. For me, young baby environmentalist Shelby, at the time I just quit shopping. Literally, I stopped shopping for 5 years when I first learned about this issue. But I think a bank account audit aside a trash audit can really help you in figuring out where you are shopping and where you are spending money and where you are consuming things that you do not need to. And it can help you break it down into how you can stop doing that. If I had done a bank account audit, it would have looked something like Amazon, Forever 21, Claire's, Sephora, Ulta, all these things that I most likely did not need to be spending money on, and therefore creating a demand for more resource to be used. So, trash audit coupled with a bank account audit, I think this is a match made in baby environmentalist heaven. So like I already hinted at, after you do your trash audit and possibly also your bank audit, the next step is to learn. And since we're on YouTube, and obviously since I make more educational content about sustainability, you could start with this channel. I would feel highly honored. And I'll leave a few videos linked below that are kind of beginner-esque, right? So my kitchen tour, making swaps in the kitchen, what I use in my bathroom routine, swaps in your bathroom. Those are two routines that I think are super easy to start with. I also recommend taking a step further, and this is maybe beyond beginner because we're getting past just the waist here, but to educate yourself via staying informed in politics and in the news, and also watching documentaries. Documentaries galore. There are so many documentaries out there that can help you on your sustainability journey. I actually have a blog post, which I'll leave linked below, with some of the ones that I personally recommend that can give you a good whole rounded view of what sustainability should be focused on. Anyone who's been on this channel for a while knows I'm not a huge reader. I don't prefer reading. I do like audiobooks, and I actually do have a whole page dedicated to books that I think that you should either read or listen to, and I'll leave those resources linked below as well. But whether those documentaries will help you have a better understanding when people in your life ask you why you're doing it, or when you talk to them about why they should be doing it, and to give you a better idea of what things you care most about and what you want to focus your energy on. Those are all really good things to nail down in the beginning. Then of course, as we see on YouTube very often, we have the beginner swaps. Often in the zero waste community, this is called the Big Four. Normally they put straws in here, but I think that's a little too narrow. So the Big Four I would recommend, and I have really great recommendations for all of these, okay? Except one. The first one, I'll say the first one, is a reusable coffee cup. I don't think you need any sort of specific coffee cup to be able to live a sustainable lifestyle. This is an item that would be very easy to thrift. Go to your nearest thrift store, pick the first travel mug that you think is kind of cute, and there you go. It's probably like $1 or $2, and it will help you get started on this journey. Then obviously we want to give up disposable plastic water bottles. So the one that I always recommend is Klean Kanteen. I find that they keep things insulated the best. And if you really want, you could also use your Klean Kanteen as your reusable travel mug. It's good for hot coffees, it'll keep them hot. It's good for your cold water, it'll keep it cold. But whatever it is, give up plastic single-use water bottles, because if we're drinking as much water as we should be, 8 glasses a day or so, whatever the recommendation is these days, then you're going through a lot of plastic just drinking bottled water. The third thing, like I said, is normally a straw, which straws are not really that big of a deal when we look at the overall picture of plastic pollution. They've been getting a lot of publication, a lot of publicized because of the poor turtles when they found one in their nose. I don't recommend using plastic straws, obviously, but with the straw, I think it's important to look at cutlery, right? So in my cutlery set, there's a fork, a knife, a spoon, chopsticks actually, and a straw. Now honestly, you don't have to buy these things. You could just take a fork or a spoon from the drawer that you already have in your kitchen and make yourself a little travel set. But for me, I personally purchased a travel set from Earth Hero, and I've kept up with it for a long time, and I use it on probably a weekly basis. If you don't have money, or you don't want to invest in something, or you're just trying to use what you already have, definitely you can do that. But creating a little carry kit for yourself is going to be helpful. And another thing that gets publicized the most, that probably you already have these lying around or you can get them for free, are reusable bags. You need to make sure that you have these 4 things on your possession pretty much all the time. If you've ever seen my What's in My Bag video, which I'll have linked below and I'll link it right here, I always have those things on hand. They help me a lot. If we're talking about swaps beyond the Big Four, one thing I want you to keep in mind as a beginner is not to throw away any of the stuff that you already have. So if you start realizing that everything you use is in plastic, because likely if you're coming to this very new, that is what you are experiencing. You're realizing, oh, my toothpaste, my deodorant, my shampoo, my conditioner, my body wash, those are all plastic. And then if I'm a menstruating human, every time I'm throwing away tampons, I'm throwing away pads, which have plastic in them. And you're realizing
plastic is fucking everywhere.
Which is true, and it can be really tempting to just throw all of those things out, get your reusable version for those things or your plastic-free version for those things, and move on with your life. But it's not the most sustainable thing to do. If you already have a product and you're not going to be repurchasing it, therefore creating the demand for more of those items to be made, there's no use in throwing it away. So we talked about the swaps you need to make, the swaps that you should wait until you use up to make. Here's a little section of things that you should just stop buying. I have several videos on my channel of things that I stopped buying for sustainable or eco-minimalist living. I'll link one of them right here for you. But a few of the things that you can just stop buying and likely already have a swap that you can use in your home for them are things like paper towels, aluminum foil, plastic cling wrap, Ziploc bags, produce bags, new clothing, and animal products. All of these things are either wasteful or just terrible for the environment, things like fast fashion and animal agriculture. If you can work towards just stopping those things, then that's going to have a really big impact on the planet. And I know I just threw out stop buying animal products like it was casual. I understand for many, many, many people, myself included, it is not, or it was not, but it is something you should start thinking about and start incorporating more plant-based proteins into your life and less animal-based proteins, both for the sake of the animals and also for the sake of the planet. So we've talked a lot about reduce, right? Those 3 R's that you were taught, reduce, reuse, recycle. Pretty much what we've gone over so far is to reduce. Then let's talk about reusing. Not throwing things away and instead finding a creative and useful way to reuse things is really good to do. And I know that this can become overwhelming in the beginning because you're like, I have like 60 jars now. I don't really have a use for all these jars. I understand that. Of course, some things will be recycled, but also there are different ways to reuse things in your home if you just stop and think about it. Pencil holders, scoops for your cat's food, all sorts of things. Reusing toilet paper rolls to sprout seeds like we are right now. There are so many ways you can implement reuse, and it's kind of easier said than done in my experience, but still definitely something to be thinking about in the beginning are those 3 R's and focusing on them. The next R is obviously recycling, which recycling, if you didn't know as a beginner, is not the most sustainable option. Always relying on recycling to be a solution is not an indefinitely sustainable process. Obviously, recycling is more sustainable than sending something straight to landfill because we are recovering those materials through recycling. But especially when we talk about plastic can only be recycled a few times before it loses its integrity and cannot be remade into something. So reduce, reuse, recycle is in that order for a reason, because recycling is sustainable but not the most sustainable option. If you do have recycling, if you are going to be recycling, it is important to know what is and is not recyclable in your particular area. If the processing plant that you are sending that material to is unable to process it, it's going to end up in landfill anyway, and that may seem like not a big deal, but when plants receive big groups of recycling and a lot of it is unrecyclable, unable to be recovered, they oftentimes send that entire batch to the landfill. So you putting things in your recycling that is not recyclable could be resulting in things that are recyclable going to landfill. So we don't want to be doing this. Once you figure out what isn't recyclable in your city, then you can also figure out if there are drop-off locations for the things that are not recyclable in your curbside. Like if your curbside doesn't accept thin plastic recycling, check your local grocery stores. Oftentimes they have drop-offs at the front where you can recycle thin plastics like we do here with HEB. And the last thing that you want to know as a beginner that is really important is an R that is not part of the normal 3 R's, but it is rot. So a huge portion of food in the US specifically gets thrown out before it even makes it to us. 40% to be exact. And just think about how many times you've bought something from the grocery store and it went bad, so you threw it out. It's also really, really bad that we're throwing food scraps in landfill for several reasons. Number one, because if we're putting a usable food scrap into the landfill, we can't then recover it to make soil, which is really important because our soil is losing a lot of biodiversity, a lot of nutrients. In landfills, things do not compost. To compost something, you need sunlight, water, and air. 3 things that food scraps do not get in landfill. And even if it did, we would not be recovering that soil. We don't dig back through landfills and find patches of soil in it and actually utilize those. And even if we did, they'd probably have all sorts of toxic things seeping into them from everything else in the landfill. When food breaks down improperly, the way that it does in a landfill, methane gas is released, which is a much more powerful gas than carbon dioxide. And if you're thinking, I live in an apartment, Shelby, I can't have my own compost bin outside, I totally understand, because again, when I was in college, I didn't have my own either. There are a few different ways you can compost with an apartment, and I'll leave some resources linked below, but one of the ways that is most common, and what I did, is you can keep your own compost bucket out on your balcony, in front of your front door, wherever it is that you can keep it. You can find a farmer who will be able to take your food scraps and add it to their compost. This is not a service that like every farmer is able to do, but likely if you make connections in your community, you can find someone who is, or someone in your neighborhood that composts, so that you can go and take your compost to them. But it is very, very important that you do your best to not send food scraps to landfill. It is an awful thing for the planet and biodiversity and ecology overall. So I hope this video was really, really helpful to those of you who are on this journey. I know I should have done this, like I said, at the beginning of the year, because maybe your goal of the year was to live a more sustainable lifestyle, and I hope that this video helps you do that. If you know anybody else that this video could help, please send it to them. I'd love to get more people over on this channel learning about sustainability. We talk about more than just beginner swaps here. We really do kind of deep dives into big environmental issues. I did a video recently, which I'll link right here, about the environmental disaster that no one's talking about. So if you missed that, go check it out. But thank you so much for being here. And remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you can do. Bye, guys.